Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. How long had it been since he had ended up there? 3 years. Waking up over 3 years ago in a strange place with people that didn't speak his language and all kept looking at him all pitiful. He didn't need to understand them to know that much, at least when they looked at him. Before then, pity wasn't what he had been used to, but he understood the look all the same. It almost got to him as much as the looks of people that tried to deny he existed. Almost. With the pity though, they'd feed him. They understood ramen well enough to get him some of that. Not the good stuff like what Ichiraku would have given him, but hey, whatever. He liked instant well enough anyway. In a matter of hours they got someone that could speak his language and his face brightened up. Maybe now he'd get some answers. He knew he had been running toward the border of a different country before blacking out and reawakening wherever he was, but he had never heard of any other country in the elemental nations speaking anything other than his own native tongue. And he had definitely never heard of any United States of America. Apparently they had never heard of a Konohagakure no Sato either, or a Hai no Kuni, or even an elemental nations to boot. They had to wait for 6 hours for Naruto to wake back up after fainting. When he did, they asked him the standard fare as to where he came from, his age, any contacts or family. Naruto didn't trust them, as the last thing he had been doing was chasing Sasuke to the border of Hai no Kuni and fighting him. He loudly demanded to tell him where Sasuke was, as he thought he was somewhere in enemy territory, but was only met with confusion. After 2 weeks though, they had enough of the young 12-year-old boy and deported him. Deport being a nice word for kicking him out of the country. At the very least they were kind enough to put him somewhere where he could understand the language. Some place called Japan. He would be their problem from that point forward. He would have normally gone kicking and screaming, fighting all the way, but 2 weeks was long enough for Naruto to find out just how shit out of luck he happened to be. This world was huge, and out of all of the massive landmasses recorded on the planet, there was no continent labeled elemental nations on the map, no matter which atlas he was forced to look through to find his home by those keeping him. There was definitely a way home. There had to be. But he hadn't found it yet. Not in 3 years, but it wasn't like he could go anywhere to look for it, because traveling required money, and he was most certainly not with money. But if there was a word that defined Uzumaki Naruto, it certainly wasn't quitter. There that gaijin punk is. Dressed in a dark blue school uniform, with a dark blue headband around his forehead emblazoned with a by now beaten up metal Konoha plate on it, Naruto turned around on a city street sidewalk to find 8 teenagers his age looking at him predatorily, all wearing a uniform of a different color, black. A different school in the area obviously. Oh goody. What do you guys want? Naruto asked, looking them over with his blue eyes, even though he already knew the answer to that. It was the same thing, and it had always been the same thing since middle school. Groups of jerks meant one thing. To kick your. The main one, at least Naruto presumed he was the main one, said as he stepped forward. The others followed behind, and the people that had been crowding the sidewalk cleared out upon seeing them try to face off with Naruto. Just because you run Tamagawa Minami High doesn't mean you're the toughest guy in Aohura City. Naruto gave them a deadpan look, sparing a glance at the badge on the of his uniform that did indeed identify him as a student of that school, says who. Damn it, it had always been like that to an extent since the first day he had first been forced to venture into school by those that had sent him to Japan in the first place. His blue eyes and spiky blonde hair weren't necessarily par the course for citizens of that nation and made him stick out like a sore thumb, not even mentioning the 3 horizontal whisker marks on both of his cheeks, but nothing really went down until Naruto was first asked where he had come from. Naruto had said he came to Japan from America, with a smile adorning his face at the rather innocent question. From the reaction he got when he told worldly knowledgeable adults about his actual factual home, he was definitely not going to do the same to a bunch of kids. Not when he had a second chance among them, who knew how they'd take it. Besides, Maybe he could make some fast friends this time instead of taking years to do it. This was not the best idea though. He might as well have told them he was from a place that didn't exist as far as they were concerned because it might have gone over better. By the end of school that day, a group of boys wanting to show him how things were done tried to strong-arm him and intimidate him. When Naruto didn't cow and they tried to push him around, he proceeded to strong-arm them by kicking the 5 attackers around and going home. From that point forward, he periodically got into fights with every tough guy that had a chip on their shoulder and literally didn't like Naruto's face. By the end of his middle school tenure, he had more or less cleaned his entire school out when it came to kids like that. Then the World Warrior Tournament was broadcast around the world, and every jackass that could throw a punch halfway straight started thinking that they were the second coming of Ryu. Especially in Aohura City, punks without training that learned of his prowess made his high school experience up until that point one big battle. It was decent training to keep himself in shape anyway. When he got home, if he couldn't have gotten much better, he could have at least kept what skills he had sharp. With that mindset, Naruto calmly looked the lot of them down through squinted eyes as he pulled out a cell phone and quickly dialed a number. Hey, emergency response. I'm at Akakiji intersection, and I'm going to need. Naruto trailed off to count the number of his would-be attackers, enough ambulances for 8 people. Hearing that Naruto was prematurely calling ambulances for them pissed all of the boys off. Thanks a lot. The leader ran forward at Naruto with his fist drawn back to strike him. You're just full of jokes, aren't you, you? He was cut off from both his attack and his rant by Naruto's closed phone bouncing off of his forehead hard enough to draw blood, followed by a rising kick planted under the chin that knocked him 10 feet into the air. He floated up into the air gracefully, landing almost fully upside down on the ground on the back of his head, unconscious, with a thud that had the others looking at their leader in abject shock and awe at how quickly he had gone down. Looking up at Naruto, they saw him picking his phone up off of the ground and placing it back into his pocket. We can still beat him. Just take him all at once. Naruto paled at hearing that and ran away down the street, turning into an alley that they chased him down, only for each boy that went inside to come flying back out rather authoritatively, some of them landing in the street and disrupting traffic. The last one standing didn't go into the alley immediately, instead stopping short of going in and pulling out a pocket knife, standing there to wait on Naruto to make his exit instead of charging in after him. Numbers obviously didn't work. You've got to come out sometime, Uzumaki. Let's see how tough you think you are now, huh? After a few seconds, nothing, I can stand here all day. The longer you wait, that's just time for my boys to wake up, and then we all get another shot at you. He noticed the people crowding around but keeping their distance and turned on them. What are you all looking at? You want some too? Rasengan, spiraling sphere. Out of the alley while his opponent's back was turned, Naruto rushed out as quick as a whip and slammed his blue orb of energy right into the teen, sending him flying through a roadside display and out through the other side, crashing against a parallel parked car door and denting it significantly with his frame. Naruto cringed when the sound of the car's alarm started going off. Even toned down, that might have been a little too much. Figuring he had spent enough time messing with those guys, he set to walking at a brisk pace. The sooner he vacated the scene, the better. He managed to do a good job of downplaying his involvement, the farther away he got, until a sharp clearing of one's throat got him to stop in his tracks. Turning around in fear of it being the owner of the car, Naruto found that it was also someone his age, but his relief faded when he realized who it was and cursed aloud. I mean, he's Sakura-chan. What's up? He greeted, sheepishly rubbing the back of his neck. Kasagano Sakura, Naruto's first actual friend that he managed to make for better or worse in Japan. Imagine Naruto's surprise when he met someone else named Sakura, and then found out that it wasn't that uncommon of a name at all. This Sakura's similarities to the one he knew ended more or less right there though. Instead of pink hair, this Sakura had short brown hair and eyes and wore the uniform for girls of their school, a short blue skirt, a white and blue short-sleeved top with a yellow scarf tied in the front around her neck, a pair of red Converse shoes, and a white headband wrapped around her head. You said we were going to meet up out front after school was over with, Naruto, Sakura said with her hands on her hips as she stared the uneasy Naruto down. You haven't trained with me in almost a month, you know, damn her, ever since she actually met Ryu she was so hard to deal with. Sakura had met Naruto not too long after he had shown up in Japan, and when Naruto had first performed a few of his ninjutsu to win a fight in the schoolyard after classes that had gotten out of hand, she had hastily introduced herself as a fan of fighters and fighting in general. As his friend, she had eased him into the whole experience of living there as best she could in exchange for just hanging around with her and her friends, which he had no problems with. Then came the World Warriors tournament 2 years ago, and she had caught a glimpse of Ryu on TV. From then she had seemingly reverse-engineered her own fighting style based on the bit she already knew and from what she had scoped out of watching Ryu's fights in the tournament. It was kind of impressive, if not a little scary, how effective a little initiative and a pretty good training regimen could be for that girl. Sakura pointed at Naruto and shook her head. You're still doing your key attacks the wrong way, she said as they proceeded to walk, getting a scowl out of Naruto. Like she knew the first thing that made his attacks work. Rasengan wasn't ki, it was chakra. And it wasn't just a ball of light, it was a pressurized ball of power that was spinning in all directions. You might as well throw a punch the way you use it. Why don't you just let me teach you the Hadoken, Surge Fist? Because his name wasn't Ryu and he didn't want to fight like Ryu either. His chakra or ki in this world, as it seemed to be called, operated under the same premise, and it was just as widely known, with certain kinds of people knowing how to use it after very hard training. Because your Hadoken S, was the blunt excuse Naruto used since he was sick of explaining that fact to her. In response though, Sakura thunked Naruto on the head, kind of like his Sakura, only he didn't end up eating pavement afterwards. She was nice enough to hold back. Ow. What? It does. You know it does. You can't even throw it 10 feet. Sakura stuck his tongue out at him, getting him to roll his eyes before a grin stuck itself onto their faces. That's why I want to train with you. My techniques are better when I'm fighting people, and you're the best fighter one know. Well, other than him of course, she finished with a slight blush on her face. Get Ryu off the brain, Naruto said, poking her in the side of the head with each word uttered. He ignored her whine of, ow, when he was done, and I wouldn't say you know him. You met him once, you sparred with him, and that's it. It's been a year already. Come on now, and the next time you go running all over the world for the summer to look for someone, don't leave me here, he pouted at not getting to go with her. I didn't have the money for you and me to go, Sakura defended. Last year she had left Aohura City to go find Ryu and ask him to train her the day after school let out. Naruto had to find out when he had dropped by Sakura's house from her mother and little brother. Needless to say, he was quite upset because Aohura was very boring other than the fights he kept getting into. Speaking of money, Naruto said, changing the subject before he depressed himself with his never-ending quest for funds, I can't hang out today. Sorry, he added when he saw her perturbed pout. An angry Sakura wasn't good for his health, just like the other one. Huh, go figure, I've got a job today. Hearing that he had a job got Sakura to narrow her eyes at him. When you say you have only one job, for today, that usually means only one thing, Naruto. What does she want from you today? She asked in an exasperated manner. Who exactly? Naruto said, looking away, trying to play dumb. You know Karin hired you to show up again. Sakura remarked with a twitching eye at his cavalier attitude on the matter. Why can't you just take a different client or something? She whined, trying to coerce him to shirk his prior engagement to train. The two girls were not particularly fans of each other, and from meeting Karin, Naruto could honestly see a few reasons why, but it wasn't too bad, because she pays better than anyone else in town would for the same work, he said, just thinking about how one job from Karin had Naruto sitting pretty with 4 months of rent paid forward the last time she hired him, and she's never asked me to kill anyone either, so there isn't any reason to ever turn her down. The most he ever did for Karin was beat up a few street toughs that had been caught wolf whistling at her school or pranking the ever-loving hell out of the same people. The hardest thing Karin had ever asked him to do was to courier her last birthday present all the way to Aohura City from a cargo ship in Tokyo. It almost got carjacked on the highways back, but Naruto kept it safe, and he got to drive a completely cherry ride that he would have never afforded himself. The way you put that, you'd think people ask you to kill others a lot, Sakura said, only being met by silence that explained all she needed to know. Wait, you do get asked to kill people? A shrug met her from Naruto as they started rounding into the neighborhood both lived in. Sometimes. I never do it though. No one he was ever requested to go after ever gave him a good enough reason to end anyone's life, and Naruto wouldn't kill unless his life were truly on the line. I am a ninja, you know, he said with a saucy grin. Right. I forgot, Sakura said with a smile. I never see you do anything, ninja until you start fighting for real. Wrapping her head around the fact that the fabled assassin's legends from the past spoke of just hung out in the open sometimes was difficult, but she'd seen him. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Most ninja do walk around in public, you know. How else would I have a place to stay in town or be able to buy groceries if I was just? He moved his fingers in a frantic, mysterious fashion, lurking in the shadows all the time. Yes, Naruto was a very eccentric person and was at times difficult to deal with, but he was a dear friend. He would have been a good friend based solely off of the entertainment factor of hanging around with him alone. Yes, because when I think of Uzumaki Naruto, I think of the word lurk. Right behind all of the shouting, the arrogance, and the short temper. Naruto righted himself as his cell phone went off. One sec, Sakura-chan, let me get this. Hello. The two walked and a frown made its way to Naruto's face. I'm almost home, what's the big deal? Silence as he listened to the response and answered back. I got sidetracked on the way back from school, and I had to walk anyway. More silence to listen again, and what was said obviously didn't please him. Why does everyone who knows I'm a ninja say that to me? What good would jumping from roofs do if I'm not hiding from anything? Sigh, I'll be there in a minute, he finished in a defeated voice. Watching her friend hang up his phone, Sakura raised an eyebrow at him. Who was that? They rounded a corner and got to Naruto's block to see a rather valuable-looking car sitting outside of his apartment complex. Naruto pointed at it and saw Sakura's face get a little angry at the sight of it. I'll give you 3 guesses before we get there, he said in a laughing voice as they got closer to the car and the back window rolled down slightly. Hey, what's up, Karin? How's it go? Front passenger's seat. Uzumaki-san. Only the brown eyes of the person in the backseat could be seen through the slightly cracked darkened window, and her voice didn't seem like she was very patient. The eyes quickly darted from Naruto to Sakura's glowering form and seemed to twinkle in momentary amusement. Hello, Sakura-san. Kanzuki-san, Sakura replied sharply. At that point Naruto swore he could see lightning fly between the two girls' eyes and decided to play rudimentary peacemaker. Opening the unlocked passenger's door broke the tense deadlock of wills between the girls as Naruto spared Sakura one last wave. I'll see you in school tomorrow. I don't really know how long this'll take, so we can train some other time, I promise. Sakura nodded before returning to glare at Karin, who was doing the same through the crack in her window. Sighing to himself, Naruto sat down in the passenger's seat and buckled himself in next to the driver, a tall skinny man with glasses and a gray suit with white gloves. Naruto knew this man decently enough as Karin's steward Shibazaki. Hey there, Shibazaki-san. The man had little patience for him, and it was best not to tread on the toes of rich people, of those that worked for them. Karin was utterly loaded. Do not presume that just because you are heading to the Kanzuki family's manor for your job's briefing it means that my eyes aren't on you. The man said in a matter-of-factly voice, I will be watching you closer than ever now. Naruto held his tongue and sank into his seat. The money was great, so he'd bite his tongue for the time being, especially since his boss was right behind him in the car. Naruto tried to turn his neck around to get a look at Karin, but she hastily put a stop to that. Eyes front, Uzumaki-san. She wasn't even looking at him, as from the inflection of her voice she was still glaring at Sakura, and when he looked out his own window he saw that his schoolmate was doing the same. She averted her glance to look at him and waved goodbye to him before the car pulled off. Just outside of Aohura City, Kanzuki family estate. Naruto had already known that Karin was rich and that the Kanzuki family was affluent, to say the least, but he had not been expecting what awaited him. It was obviously why she only chose to see him when paying him for his work. Rumor had it that Karin's family owned a compound that sat on 200 miles of land. Naruto didn't believe that rumor, as he felt it was bullshit and no one owned that much land in one specific spot. Upon seeing the little bit of land that Karin's family gave her to stay while she chose to attend high school in Aohura City, and the absurdly large mansion that sat on it, he was inclined to give those rumors a little bit more weight now. After parking, Naruto quickly sprang out of the car to look at his current surroundings. It was huge. Running his way out of there would have made for a good workout, so whatever was about to go down had better have been on the level. It was a comfortable temperature outside despite the fact that it was getting on to be summer and the wait was rather insufferable. Naruto honestly couldn't wait for the month-long break when it was coming up for his own personal reasons. Well, Uzumaki-san, we don't have all day. Apparently Karin caught him staring at the property because she had to get his attention. Naruto turned towards her and began to follow after her and Shibazaki as they walked through the large driveway to get to the front doors. Kanzuki Karin was a shorter girl than him and had blonde hair much like his own, styled into curly ringlets with a blue bow in the back. Her school uniform was completely red, skirt and all right down to her shoes, with some white trim around the collar and the ends of the short sleeves and a blue scarf tied around the front. So, Naruto started as he followed them inside and tried not to stop and stare at the rather roomy and ornate digs that accentuated the mansion. I don't want to sound like I'm in a hurry or I don't want whatever this job is, but what do you need? You never told me over the phone, and I'm pretty sure you don't want me to kill someone. If someone in that family wanted to kill someone, it would be Karin's father who ran the family's corporation. He doubted that her father even knew who he was. You usually just flat out tell me what you want, I go do it, and then you meet me to pay me. Karin turned around to face him with her painfully pretty features and smirked at him before flipping her hair and continuing to walk. Shibazaki shot him something of a dirty look before leading him along as well, and Naruto flipped him off behind his back. Do not tell me you did not enjoy the trip, Karin said as they walked through the mansion. He swore that just one of those rooms could hold his entire apartment 3 times over. I know there's some kind of novelty when people like you see places like this for the first time. While he didn't like the way she said that, she also had a point. The trip was kind of worth seeing all of these things, riding in that car, and possibly getting to chow down on some of the rich people food in that mansion. If she were a good host she'd feed him before he left, and who would he be to turn down such a generous offer from his constant boss? Yeah, but you usually act like even meeting to pay me is a hassle for you, Naruto pointed out, as their previous face-to-face meetings didn't necessarily scream out that she wanted to invite him to her home. Eventually they made their way into a rather large atrium with a garden, a clear amount of sunlight whenever it was available, pillars, and within the pillars a rather large circular stone brick circle. Suddenly Karin held out her hand behind her without turning around, directing Naruto to stop, which he did. She continued to walk forward a ways, probably 20 feet if he had to estimate, and if he hadn't been known for ing at anything involving numbers, distance, or guessing in school. Shibazaki held up her school bag and opened it to allow her to reach inside. As she did so she continued speaking to Naruto. Well, there is a very good reason you're here. I can assure you of that. She pulled out a pair of brown 4 ounces gloves and casually put them on with her back turned to her guest. Did you know that I fought Kasagano Sakura before? She didn't need to see him. She could feel in the air that Naruto had tilted his head to the side in a confused manner, eliciting a slight giggle out of her. Yes, I fought her last year right before she went on her little trip without telling you or anyone. I held a tournament and everything. Where were you? So that's why they hated each other. A past catfight between two very cute girls, and he had missed it. Where the hell was he when all of this was happening? Probably working out of town. So, who won? Naruto asked curiously as he sat cross-legged on the ground in a bored manner. He didn't even know that Karin could fight at all. That was some new and very welcome information. Wait, you had a tournament. Was there prize money? Damn it, he could have gotten himself paid. Dodging all questions, Karin had her own query she wanted answered. Believe it or not, I've heard that you, Uzumaki Naruto, are one of the finest fighters in Japan. People don't know who Kasagano-san is, but a lot of people know you by name. I didn't even know who you were until I was told that you didn't enter my little tournament. At that, she eyed him sharply. You were that notable that your presence was missed. And then I found out that you were a local freelancer and hired you for some odd jobs. While he didn't know, or particularly care he was slightly famous, Naruto's work and never-ending search to find a way home had him work as far out as Sapporo before. That wasn't the point of his focus though. Seriously, you had a tournament. Damn it, I miss everything. Ignoring Naruto's apparent one-track mind, Karin turned around, finally revealing the fighting gloves on her delicate hands. I have also heard that Kasagano-san has never defeated you. That by proxy implies that you are stronger than me, and I hate mere speculation. She said with her hands on her hips as Shibazaki moved far out of the way, so I'm prepared to give you 1.5 million yen. Deal, Naruto said, his eyes just seeing the money right then. Maybe now he could fund a wider search for someone with some answers that could help him other than just where he was landlocked to. He didn't even need to think about it. He might have even killed the appropriate person for that much money. Karin continued, only slightly perturbed by Naruto's interrupting outburst. I will reward you that same sum of money if you can defeat me cleanly in a one-on-one fight. Right here, right now. That took the money-dreaming grin to drop off of Naruto's face. Wait, you want to fight me right here, right now? I do believe that is what I just said to you, Uzumaki-san. Karin pulled her brown gloves tightly onto her hands, already knowing that she had him at the mere utterance of how much she would give him. But, if you lose to me, you must tell me how to defeat Kasagano-san. What? Like he had advice for that. Even now that she had some of Ryu's moves copied to memory, he could still kick her around pretty good. He didn't cognizantly formulate plans when he fought Sakura, he just fought her and adjusted on the fly. That was how he approached every fight. Granted, they had also never gone all out against one another. There were just certain attacks that Naruto was never going to use against a friend. Still, he could probably come up with some kind of answer that would satisfy her even if he did lose. But if Karin found out it was BS when she fought Sakura again, she would never hire him again. However, he wasn't going to lose. Not just because he believed he would win, but because for 1,500,000 yen he would make sure to find some way to win. It wouldn't have mattered who he was fighting, even if his opponent was the most famous martial artist in the world. You're on, Naruto said, unbuttoning his uniform top and quickly relieving himself of it to reveal a sinewy muscular build when it came to his arms and torso. A tattoo of a Konoha leaf insignia sat on his upper right pectoral muscle as a reminder that he was one day return. So what are the rules? Karin was right on top of having rules set for this little encounter. You cannot leave the confines of the stone brick ring or else you will be disqualified, she started with, getting a frown out of Naruto. You cannot attack a downed opponent. No strikes to the eyes or the groin for what it is worth. And we fight until one of us are knocked out of the ring or to the ground for a count of 10. Traditional full contact tournament rules apply, Uzumaki-san. I know you are a street fighter at heart, but these are my terms. Take them or leave them. Rules. Who fought with rules? Naruto wasn't much of a prize fighter even though the notion had taken him every now and again. Rules were tailor-made to keep a good ninja down. Apparently he was going to be abiding by them today, because he nodded in agreement as he dropped his backpack, pulled a pair of cloth hand wraps from his back pockets and wrapped them around his hands. If he had time to change clothes, he probably would have hopped into something more comfortable for this situation, but opportunity didn't knock that often for him. Let's do this then, Dadbayo. Naruto said, jumping up and down thrice excitedly before setting himself in what looked like a rudimentary stance for brawlers. A confident look upon her features, Karin set herself into a fighting stance with her left leg and arm out forward, her right leg back, and her right hand held at the ready in a knife hand posture. Shibazaki, you are the referee, and you will be impartial, won't you? She asked, leaving an underlying tone in the air that said he had better call it right down the middle. Of course, Kanzuki-sama. Shibazaki said with a half bow as he stood between them in a referee's position. Are the fighters ready? Naruto nodded with a smile, cracking his neck to the side as he loosened himself up. Karin nodded as well, still smirking in anticipation. Very well. Fight. Never one to take the affirmation to fight lightly, especially since he had been the one issued the challenge. Naruto went right at Karin since he couldn't even leave the ring to confuse her. This left the only other options to flat out put her down or knock her out of the ring. He didn't expect her to duck under his first punch though. Nor did he particularly expect her to cartwheel safely right out of the way of his spin kick that he tried when she moved to his side. The girl was nimble. He only fought a dozen or so people that he would readily register as dangerous outside of Sakura since he turned up in Japan, but from sheer reaction alone he'd say that Karin would have to be added to that list. It must have shown on his face too, because her face simply oozed confidence when he faced off with her again. Are you wondering what my style is? He actually hadn't been, but sure, why not? So Naruto just nodded. Kanzuki Ryu Kakutojutsu. You can't really learn it because it's something I developed myself. Karin pointed to herself haughtily. I'm just better. I don't like handling my own business in a physical sense with those beneath me. That is why I hire you. And you do good work, but you just do not possess the skill to defeat me. For 1,500,000 yen, I'll kick Sagat right in his scrot and smile about it. Then I'll kick the shit out of him when he starts something. Don't believe me? Just watch this. Naruto proclaimed brazenly before attempting to attack again. I have to admire your determination though, Karin said until Naruto placed his index and middle fingers in a cross formation. And what exactly is that going to do? I just said you can't poke me in the eyes. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Shadow Clone Technique. Instead of just one Naruto, Karin was now forced to fight four of them while the original Naruto sat back and watched, arms crossed and a smirk on his face. The four Narutos and Karin began engaging in a furious flurry of punches and kicks, trading back and forth. Whenever Karin would lash out at one clone, it would block and she would have to contort her body and use her full range of flexibility to avoid corresponding attacks from the other three that knew how to coordinate their movements. Naruto, or his clones, landed the first significant strike of the fight as when Karin found one of her kicks blocked by a Naruto, another one blasted her in the body with one that doubled her over, the other two Narutos retaliating in kind. Bunshin Kaden Kakuto Otoshi, clone spinning heel drop. The two clones somersaulted at her and landed axe kicks on her head and shoulder, knocking her right to the ground as they dispelled and revealed that the Naruto who had originally blocked her punch was the real one and he had been fighting her himself all along. Shibazaki looked on stunned. He had been in awe of the Kanzaki Zaibatsu heiress's combat prowess, fighting evenly against four opponents at once, but Naruto had been all four of those opponents at once. That was a whole different league of freaky that he wasn't prepared to see. Naruto clearing his throat brought him back to the present, and from the perturbed look on Naruto's face it was clear that he was looking for a count. As Shibazaki actually began counting to 10, Karin stood up off of the ground and got back into her stance. That was rather interesting. I do not believe I have ever seen anything like that before. Naruto grinned at her from the compliment, but just like that, Karin tried to turn the tables and went back in on him. We're not close to being finished yet though. Resen Cho. In a show of blinding speed, Karin dashed forward for a pointed elbow smash intended to crack sternums. She had to have some lion in her because now that it was one-on-one again her pace seemed to quicken further from just that one move. Naruto blocked the attack with his forearms and could swear she almost broke one of them before he had to block one of her punches and tried to trap an arm. He yanked her in, but ate a fast trio of chops to the forehead for his trouble that shook him up. Thank goodness for the metal plate. But that was only the beginning of Karin's offensive attack. A fanning, can-looking double kick combo pressed two shots right under Naruto's chin and popped him up into the air, Mujin Kyaku, inexhaustible leg. While Naruto was stuck and prone 10 feet off of the ground, she wasted no time in setting up her next attack, jumping directly at Naruto with her arms drawn in a double sledgehammer motion over and behind her head, glowing somewhat, Kanzuki Ryu Kouken. She smashed Naruto down to the ground hard and with enough authority to get a crack out of a few of the bricks and heard the air easily whoosh out of his body from the strike. Karin stood over Naruto and flipped her curled hair over her shoulder as Shibazaki started the count on Naruto. Well. It looks like there will be no money for you, Uzumaki-san, she said, before beginning to laugh. Her laughter quickly died in her throat, however. She let out a small shriek when Naruto suddenly pulled his legs inward toward his chest and kipped up to his feet before cracking his neck and giving her a dry look. How? How in the world did you stand back up from that? With my legs, Naruto quipped before seeing how close she still was to him, in shock that he got up from one of her strongest attacks. Naruto made the cross seal and in a puff of smoke Karin was surrounded by several cage bunshin that all moved in to kick her into the air from all sides. Zu. Ma. Ki. The original Naruto sprang off of the back of one of his clones to jump into the air over Karin where he proceeded to finish the combination and kick her to the ground. Uzumaki Naruto Renden Naruto Uzumaki combo. Karin hit the ground face down and a worried attendant Shibazaki didn't even bother counting as he rushed in to check up on her while Naruto backed off and poked at his own bruises. Kanzuki-sama. He gasped in pleasant surprise when he saw her move, lifting her head off of the ground to look up at Naruto on her elbows. Thank goodness you're alright. Damn it, Shibazaki, Karin grunted out as she tried to stand up, eventually making it back to her feet. I wasn't done yet. Now you've gone and gotten me disqualified. Naruto blinked when he realized that she had indeed stood back up before a count of 10 seconds, and that in a fight with actual rules Shibazaki's intervention would be the equivalent of someone's corner throwing in the towel. That means I won, right? Woo. Yada. I won. 1.5 million yen. That's like, he started counting on his fingers trying to do some currency calculations. I don't know how many American dollars or euros or whatever, but I'm sure it's more than enough. Almost 15,000 euros and almost 20,000 US dollars, and over 12,000 pounds, Karin replied automatically. Naruto stopped celebrating and did comparisons in his head. Damn, that's a steep drop-off. Oh well, it's more than I had already, he said before chuckling in a pleased manner to himself as he grinned and rubbed under his nose. He walked up to Karin and extended his hand. That was a really good scrap. Too bad your butler interfered before we could really cut loose. Shibazaki took offense to being called a butler while Karin looked at Naruto's extended hand like it was an unknown gesture for someone like him to do such a thing. Begrudgingly she reached for his hand and shook it. So now I have lost to two people beneath my station. That's simply no good, she said dully, a frown adding on the scuffs and light marks of strife marring her pretty face. Fine. I'll take you to the vault later and pay you accordingly per the terms of your victory. But for now, Ishizaki. Clang. Asterisk. Naruto fell face first to the ground with swirls in his eyes and a lump on the back of his head. Over him stood a quite large and burly man with gray slacks, a white short-sleeved dress shirt, and an apron. In his hands, he held a dented metal platter. Karin looked at the man and then kneeled down by Naruto's head, poking at his lump several times before looking up at the person who had just hit him. I merely intended for you to bring my opponent and I some refreshments, Ishizaki. I did not require you to, nor did I wish for you to hit him. My apologies, Kanzuki-sama, Ishizaki said as he bowed to Karin. He stood back up and hid the platter behind his back before coughing to get her attention as she held Naruto's head in her hands, lolling it back and forth as she came to conclude that he was utterly unconscious. Do you wish for me to fetch the young man an ice pack? Or perhaps he requires stitches. Sometime later, Naruto's apartment. Thank goodness for knowing rich girls like Karin. That was all Naruto had to say as he looked at the large jars of savings he kept in a locked secret compartment in the hardwood floor underneath his bed. Having just made his clones painstakingly count the money, Naruto concluded that over the 3 years he had been in Japan he had managed to save up almost 12 million yen by way of penny pinching and working his off every day doing loose mercenary work for most of those 4 years. That was enough to fund a trip around the world if that was what he really wanted to do. Pretty soon, probably by the next year's summer, he'd have enough money to do what he wished. What he had been saving for and living day after day at the start for, to search high and low for any possible way back home. Even after 3 years he still had no idea what happened. One moment he and Sasuke were clashing with their respective techniques and the next he was in America. But the world was massive. It had things like the internet and television. Hell, even Sakura told him it was full of weird things that he hadn't even seen yet. Who knew what he would find out there? And he could make his own money on the road if need be. 3 months at the very least was how long a good trip would take, by his estimation. Missing some school would come with it, but he would easily fall on that grenade. Yes, what a crying shame, to be forced to miss some school. A necessary sacrifice. He had no idea what he was going to do, where to look, or anything like that, but he was going to keep hope alive. And with that hope in mind, Naruto jumped out of his bed and bit his thumb well enough to draw blood as he started rolling through hand seals, Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning technique. Naruto slammed his hand on the ground and in a puff of smoke he waited with bated breath for it to clear out so that he could see if this time he had done it. Maybe this time he had summoned Gamakichi. Or, Kami help him, he'd even take Gamatatsu this time. Just anything except. Croak. Naruto dropped his head as he got a sight of just what he had summoned. A regular old, run-of-the-mill swamp toad. Not even a strange color other than what he had seen in the books. No armor, it was just big. Really big. Half his size actually. Yo, Naruto said to the toad that just stared at him with its throat moving in and out. It just sat there doing nothing. Come on. Jump. Spit fire or oil. Pull out a sword or put on some armor. Do something. He poked at the toad with his foot to urge it on. The toad then proceeded to hop right onto Naruto's bed. Swamp slime and all. Great. Because he felt like sleeping on the couch in his living room anyway that night. Good night, Mr. Toad, Naruto said with a sigh as he grabbed his night clothes and headed to the bathroom, forming a half-ram seal and dismissing the toad back from whence it came. Later that night, Naruto sat in a flooded boiler room looking inside a great barred gate at the darkness inside of it. He could make out an absolutely towering figure inside, but it was either sleeping or just pretending to in order to ignore and make light of his presence. Nonplussed by his tenant's lack of attention to him, Naruto just sat there and stared before opening his mouth to speak. As he inhaled the slightest breath to begin talking, a great set of claws slammed through the holes in the bars in an attempt to grab him, but they stopped just short of grazing the bangs on his forehead. Staring at the razor-sharp claws in front of his face, Naruto just blinked once before trying again to start a conversation. How did we get here? It was the same song and dance each time he came to converse with the beast for the past 3 years. If he knew the Kyuubi by now, then the next thing it would say would be, "We could tear this world asunder. Free me from this seal, boy. What happened at the Valley of the End? Why do you try to eke out this meager living of yours? Trying to live in harmony in this town with the people that wish to cause you harm. You fight those foolish enough to challenge you, and that is a start, but you could go so much further. Make them fear you. Give your heart to me, Uzumaki Naruto. Succumb to your rage, your hatred, your desire to just make this world you see as a dream disappear. I can do this for you. Let me do this for you. The claws pulled back inside of the cell and Naruto just continued to sit and stare. Yelling at the Kyuubi for 3 straight years didn't solve any problems whatsoever. He didn't even know why he came back in there anymore. Maybe just because it was the only thing he really had to remember his home by. He was sent over to Japan with no weapons, with not even the tattered orange clothes he had on his back in exchange for new ones to last him until he could find his own way. Maybe talking to the Kyuubi, despite its repetitive answers, just so happened to be his way to try and keep his focus. That he would get home. No matter how long it took. Naruto, wake up. Naruto, wake up. Awaking with a start, Naruto fell out of his sleeping spot on his couch onto the floor and rubbed his head from the fall. In a white t-shirt and frog-covered boxers, Naruto slogged to his front door and opened it to find Sakura dressed for school. Yo. Yo yourself, she said in reply, looking him over and raising an eyebrow. Move your butt to the bathroom and get ready to go. We're going to be late for school again, waiting on you to get ready. Naruto rubbed his sleepy eyes and turned to head back inside with a yawn as he made his way to his room to get his uniform and then to the bathroom to get prepared for the day. You could just go without me. We're not late for another hour. If I don't make you go, you'd just be wasting your money by not showing up, Sakura said as she leaned against the closed door of his bathroom to wait on him. I can't let my favorite sparring partner fail out of school now, can I? Even if you are a gun for hire. Guns are for chumps, Naruto said from the bathroom as he brushed his teeth, and you can find other sparring partners. The city is full of people that I think would probably fight you. Maybe, Sakura said idly, but they're not friends like us. Friends like us, Naruto thought to himself as he finished brushing his teeth and started his shower. Huh. Flashback. 2 years ago. How come you never talk about America, Naruto? Sakura asked Naruto as he was hard at work training in her family's backyard. Sakura was training too, but Naruto was working straight from scratch as he tried to learn how to create his own distance ninjutsu. She noticed Naruto stopping in his use of the ram seal to build his chakra out of his listening to her. You look American, and you act American, but you don't tell any stories, nothing. And where did you learn how to fight like a ninja in America? You don't tell anyone anything, and it's been a year. Naruto dropped his ram seal and stopped to look at his year-long friend. He had met a few other interesting people, but due to their proximity and the fact that she had reached out to him first, Sakura was most definitely the closest, after he got over how weird it was to know another girl named Sakura. Looking at the curious brown-eyed girl, Naruto didn't know what to say. Well, there's not much to say. Is that bad? Sakura just shrugged her shoulders and jumped into a stance to charge up her ki that Naruto had somehow shown her how to tap into when she had asked about it. Okay, here goes. I'm gonna get it this time. Just like Ryu. Hadoken, Surge Fist. She thrust her hands forward with the palms of her hands touching, one vertical and the other upside down. Nothing but a short fizzle of energy was slightly visible and then nothing. The dejected girl dropped to her knees and let out a desperate sigh. Ah, no. Naruto laughed at her a bit and held out his right hand with a big grin on his face. Hey, Sakura-chan. He said to get her attention before sticking his tongue out to focus on his jutsu and in a matter of moments formed a one-handed Rasengan. A year of on-again, off-again training to get it down pat and he certainly pulled it off. Bet you think my stupid Rasengan spiraling sphere isn't so lame now, huh? At least I can actually hold it. You can't even keep your move together. Sakura stared at the spinning blue orb before coming to her senses and jumping back to her feet to clinch her fists at Naruto angrily. You think you're so cool. That's why you look like a cat. A cat. Naruto's focus on maintaining the Rasengan fell along with his jaw as he stared at Sakura in complete and utter surprise. A cat. Really? He tried to look at his own cheeks as he tugged on them. Is it the birthmarks? A gleam came to Sakura's eye as she ran at Naruto and dove at him with a jumping uppercut. I might not be able to do Hadouken, but I can do this. And she wound up hitting the very distracted Naruto right on the chin, knocking him into the air and flat on his butt. How about that? My Shoryuken, Rising Dragon Fist. It's. Naruto yelled from his backside, rubbing his chin. You got 3 feet off the ground max. I jumped 10 feet higher than you as a warm-up. He stood back up and worked the kinks out of his jaw before smirking at her. But if you want to fight, that's cool with me. He wasn't really going to beat her up. If he ever laid a truly unkind hand on someone like Sakura, he'd never forgive himself. A fight seemed to be just what Sakura wanted as she let out a celebratory hop. Finally, you're fighting me again. It's so much fun having a friend I can spar with. This is great. A friend. Well, that was just alright with Naruto as far as he was concerned. End flashback. And that was when things started turning towards Naruto's direction. Life in a strange place became less strange and far more tolerable. Even fun from time to time as he met a few more people that he got to know one way or another. It definitely could have been worse. But he'd still get home no matter what. He had to find a way. That was what Naruto thought to himself as he stared at his own post-shower reflection in the fogged-up mirror. That he still had to get home. He had a life to live, people to get back to. Come on, Naruto. We've got 20 minutes to get to class, so get dressed and let's go. But what about the life he had here? It wasn't so bad. And what about these people that he knew here? They had their quirks, but they were good people at heart even if it wasn't outwardly evident in some cases. Would he really just let go and let the past die? Could he let it go? More importantly, did he want to deep down? Finishing putting on his uniform and opening his bathroom door to motion to Sakura to go with a smile pasted on his face, he had to wonder to himself, and wonder he did, all the way to school, all the way through his classes and lunch, all day long. Even if he didn't find a way home, and it was 99.9% possible that he would never do so, why was a part of him feeling like he'd be so comfortable if that were indeed the case? Character profile. Name: Naruto Uzumaki. Nationality: Japan. Gender: male. Age: 15. Birthday: October 10th. Height, weight: 5 feet 8 154ths of a pound. Blood type: B. Likes ramen of all sorts, pranking certain people, gardening, video games, geography, helping people, American music. Dislikes: vegetables, cats, the delinquents in Aohura City that pick fights with him, the stereotypes for ninja. Hobbies: gardening, working freelance odd jobs for money to pay for school and housing, hustling, playing darts against others for pocket change. Rivals: none at this time that he considers. Fighting style: ninjutsu, self-developed taijutsu that focuses on his speed advantage over others. When faced with a rare speed disadvantage, clones are used liberally to supplement. Current techniques: kunai, shuriken, kawarimi no jutsu, substitution technique, kage bunshin no jutsu, shadow clone technique, rasengan, spiraling sphere, kuchio's no jutsu, summoning technique. Toads, Uzumaki Naruto Renden, Naruto Uzumaki combo, Chakura Tenki Sha, Chakra Spitfire. Hyper techniques: Uzumaki Naruto Mugen Renden, Naruto Uzumaki Infinite Combo, Odama Rasengan, Great Ball Rasengan, Cho Ikataiho, Super Breath Cannon. Background: the Jinchuriki power of human sacrifice, demon container, of the Kyuubi no Yoko and a Genin level shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato at last check. Under unknown circumstances he was ripped from his home and wound up in a strange place with no way back in sight. Settled in Japan in Aohura City where he became a ninja, or a mercenary for hire, despite the fact that the bulk of his jobs don't always involve fighting and center more along odd jobs quite often. Is raising money for himself to fund a trip around the world to try and locate anyone or anything that can give him the answers he desires. Has continued to painstakingly train himself and has created more than a few ninjutsu and other fighting techniques from scratch over the course of 3 years. Name: Sakura Kasagano. Nationality: Japan. Gender: female. Age: 15. Birthday: March 15th. Height, weight: 5 feet 2 1/20ths of a pound. Blood type: AB. Likes: track and field, white rice, baseball, Ryu. Dislikes: math, playing video games with her brother, or Naruto because she never wins, when Naruto plays rap music during sparring sessions. Hobbies: practicing English, cooking, playing baseball. Rivals: Karin Kanzuki, Naruto Uzumaki, friendly, one-sided. Fighting style: imitation of Ryu's fighting style rooted in Ansatsuken. Current techniques: Hadoken, surge fist, Shouken, rising uppercut, Shunpukyaku, twirling gale kick, Sakura Otoshi, cherry blossom drop. Hyper techniques: Midair Zakura, tumultuous cherry blossom, Haru Ichiban, first spring storm, Shinku Tengu Hadoken, vacuum heavenly command surge fist. Background: a young Japanese high school student with an intense fascination with world-famous fighter Ryu. The first friend a misplaced Naruto found in Aohura City, she began to participate loosely in street fighting after watching the World Warrior Tournament 2 years ago. A very quick and dedicated study, she has reverse-engineered many of the fighting techniques utilized by Ryu in her own fashion after only a few sightings of it, though Naruto constantly teases her due to the fact that they noticeably aren't as strong. Having actually met her idol the previous year, her drive to improve is now stronger than ever. Name: Karin Kanzuki. Nationality: Japan. Gender: female. Age: 15. Birthday: September 15. Height, weight: 5 feet 3 1/20ths of a pound. Blood type: O. Likes: total victory. Dislikes: Sakura, more or less, minds of commoners. Hobbies: coming up with techniques for her own self-made fighting style. Rivals: Sakura Kasagano. Fighting style: Kanzuki Ryu Kakutujutsu. Current techniques: Guren Ken, Crimson Lotus Fist, Husho, Crumbling Palm, Mujin Kyaku, Inexhaustible Leg, Resen Cho, Resen Ha, Violent Massacre Break, Yasha Geishi, Juden, Gedan, Arakuma Anashi. Hyper techniques: Kanzuki Ryu Shinpaikaibaku, Kanzuki Ryu Koo Ken. Background: the heiress of one of the richest families in the world, running the Kanzuki Zaibatsu, Karin is in possession of exorbitant amounts of money and a motto taught to her by her father: all you need is victory. Karin has her own interpretation of the meaning to say, the worst we'll ever be is the best. With her resources, drive, and interest in martial arts, Karin created her own fighting style and is fancied as a rather talented fighter. The rival of Kasagano Sakura, she strives to avenge a humiliating public tournament loss to the girl and prove her superiority. She originally found amusement in hiring Sakura's close friend Uzumaki Naruto for what she believed to be menial work to mess with both her and him, but when Naruto simply took this as normal work instead of as a slight, she continued to legitimately hire him, finding use in him. A proud and somewhat snooty girl due to her upbringing, she is rarely seen without her protective attendant Shibazaki or her kinder butler Ishizaki. The month-long summer vacation had ended, and school was back in session, much to the chagrin of the vast majority of students in Aohura City. A loud yawn came from Naruto as he and Sakura sat outside under a tree for the duration of their lunch. Sakura was sitting under the tree, anyway. Naruto was sitting in the tree, out of sight of anyone that didn't already know he was there. This more or less only meant Sakura knew he was there, and anyone that wanted to find him would have to come to her first. She'd pretend that she didn't know he was there and would give him whatever message anyone had for him later, all the while Naruto was up in the tree or somewhere high and out of view depending on where they ate, listening to every word only known to her. Maybe he was a ninja after all. A smile came to the aspiring female fighter's face when she saw another girl walking up to her spot under the tree. In between a sip of her juice, Sakura waved at her friend. You took a while getting out here, Kei-chan. We only have 10 minutes left for lunch. Chito's Kei was a girl Sakura and Naruto's age that wore the same uniform Sakura did. She had long brown hair and a yellow band in it. Unlike Sakura, she had absolutely no tomboy traits whatsoever. Naruto honestly didn't know how the two were such good friends since Kei was the exact opposite of Sakura. She detested fighting, and unlike Sakura seemed to take in things like boys and clothes. Sakura liked clothes, but the only boy she was interested in, much to Naruto's never-ending annoyance due to having to deal with it, was Ryu. Kei smiled and sat down under the tree, pulling out a bento box in a hurry so that she had time to eat something before time ran out. I just heard a super weird rumor. She looked around while breaking apart a pair of chopsticks. Speaking of which, do you know where Naruto is? It kind of involves him. She knew he was around there close by somewhere and she could have just said it and he'd hear it, but it seemed too much like talking about someone behind their back, and doing something like that about a friend wasn't cool. Sakura's eyes drifted upwards momentarily and the leaves rustled as an upside-down Naruto stuck his head and upper torso out of the leaves, suddenly scaring the rather normal girl when she saw him calmly sipping on a juice box. Yo yourself, Kei said, getting her heart rate back to normal after Naruto's appearance raised it. Man, he was the weirdest American she had ever seen, and it wasn't just the ninja thing either. Why are you in the tree? Naruto stopped drinking and looked around at the two girls below him. Because it's more fun than being on the ground. Kei threw a wrapper at him that bounced off his forehead in response. A small laugh came from Sakura before she turned her attention back to the main topic at hand. So, back to whatever you were talking about, Kei-chan. What's the rumor involving Naruto? Is it another high school's punks coming to call him out again? It doesn't matter if it is, Naruto said, narrowing his eyes at Sakura. You never help me when they do. You never need help. Not really the point. Sakura rolled her eyes while Kei shook her head in the negative and continued, it's not a gang this time, thank goodness. It's just one guy really. And he's not demanding that you face him and he's not out looking for you like everyone else always does. He's in the town plaza breaking bricks, doing demonstrations, and calling you out. He wears a GI and everything. He even threw a Hadoken, Surge Fist, as a demonstration. A fighter with a Hadoken. Sakura got her hopes up immediately upon hearing that. Does that mean that he came back? How long is that person supposed to be in the plaza? Please tell me he's not leaving anytime soon. Ryu was a wanderer for certain. He never stayed around anywhere for too long if he didn't have to. It was what made finding him so hard the previous year for the schoolgirl. Kei gave Sakura an amused smile, knowing full well of her noted interest in Ryu while Naruto made a gagging gesture with his hands. A swat to the shoulder stopped that though. You're in luck then. I heard that the guy said he wasn't leaving a public area until Uzumaki. Naruto stopped hiding in the shadows and came out to face him like a man instead of waiting to attack him from behind like a mouse. Hiding in the shadows. Naruto hated people calling him out and saying that he was ducking them. He most certainly did not. He'd fight anyone face to face, even if he knew he was shirking his ninja responsibilities to win without having to resort to head-on fighting. But he hadn't fought any other ninja so far, so it was cool. I'm in school. Doesn't this guy know that? And just like that, Sakura's expression dropped. Ha, it's not Ryu. First of all, even if he was looking for Naruto, he'd never do anything that brazen to get him to come out. And he definitely wouldn't insult Naruto's fighting style either. He'd just look for him. Demonstrations aren't really his thing either. More important things to worry about here, Naruto said, his attention raptly on Kei at this point and not dealing with Sakura's Ryu deprivation issues. This isn't good. If that guy keeps talking crap about me, he's gonna screw with my business. He needed that money. He almost had what he needed to get started and every little bit helped. His response got dry looks from the pair of girls and felt the need to defend himself. Hey, just because you guys are too cheap to hire me for stuff doesn't mean other people in this town don't. Kei gave Naruto a deadpan look in between taking bites of her food. Just how many people in Aohura City need a professional ninja? Naruto grinned and pointed to himself. I'm more than just a pair of fists, you know. I do gardening and landscaping. household repair, a little construction here or there, animal care. A smirk came to Kay's face at that point. So you're basically saying that you cut grass, you're a cheap source of manpower, you dig ditches, and you walk dogs. Am I wrong about any of that? Naruto turned his back and sat in a gloomy manner, poking his finger into the dirt. D-rank missions pay the bills too. I can't always kick. At that point his cell phone went off, getting him to turn back around to the girls as he fished it out of his pocket and flipped it open. Batsu. What do you want? Aren't you in school right now? Ikimonji Batsu. Another one of Naruto's friends, and he was something of a street punk, but that was only by proxy of what he got mixed up in. He had a brawling style, even less polished than Naruto's, but his use of ki to back up his fighting made him one of the most dangerous people Naruto knew. Apparently he had taken instructions from an online ninjutsu combat instruction page to learn his fighting style, and this was eventually how the two of them met. Because Batsu was very interested in anything involving ninjas, and Naruto was hiring himself out as a ninja. When they met, Batsu was very underwhelmed by Naruto's presence, and the hot-headed young man apparently let Naruto verbally have it on how he wasn't a ninja and how it was false advertising. Naturally, Naruto took exception to this, and then they fought. And then they wound up friends despite attending different schools. He proceeded to put the phone on speaker so the girls could hear the conversation. It's called lunch, retard. But whatever. You hear about the guy downtown talking about you? Yeah, Naruto said with a touch of confusion. You know about it too. How can anyone not know about it? Everyone has to go through that place to go across town, and it's not like the guy is quiet. You should hear some of this stuff. He's spoiling for a fight with you. God damn it, I am in high school. Naruto yelled loudly to no one in particular. If someone's going to talk shit, they should at least give me time to get out of class first before they keep saying more. Naruto growled when he heard Batsu chuckle over the line. Stop laughing. If it was you, you'd be all grumpy and pissed too. A friend of mine is coming with me to check this out after school. You're probably going to be there with bells on, aren't you? You'll be seeing me there for sure, Dadbao. Naruto said, full of intent at this point. He didn't even want to hear any more about what this guy was saying. Looking at his two friends, he punched his palm. Man, I can't wait for school to let out. Later that day, downtown, Aohura City Town Plaza. Why are you here? Naruto said in a disenfranchised voice as he, Sakura, and Kei headed within the park where the plaza was located at the center of. Someone had met up with them on the street just as they crossed the street to get into the park itself. The reason for Naruto's, and to an even higher extent Sakura's, feelings on the matter was the fact that Karin that had found them and met up with them. Flipping her hair over her shoulder, the blonde heiress responded, well, naturally, you work for me. And if there is a fool out there slighting your good name, he is also slighting mine as well. I am simply here to ensure you defend both your honor and my own. You have honor. Sakura quipped with a smirk at the jab on her rival. That's news to me. I certainly have more than you do, copycat. Karin retorted without missing a beat. The copycat jab got a bewildered look from Sakura before she growled at Karin, who continued to goad her. If you keep mimicking a real fighter, maybe one of these days someone will believe you actually are one. As fun as a catfight between the two would be, this was neither the time nor the place for one. Naruto had come for a reason. If you two henhouse hens are finished clucking, could you help me look for Batsu so I can go kick some? The two girls continued to glare at each other, but they were silent. Naruto turned towards Kei. Did these two really go at it that hard last year? You should have been here, Naruto. Kei said, remembering that she hadn't really taken Sakura serious as a fighter until she had gone up against Karin in her tournament. Sakura-chan. Sakura heard someone call out to her and broke her glare with Karin to see a girl with a princess-style haircut, colored brown with a white headband on. She had orange wristbands, a blue school uniform skirt and a blue sleeveless vest with a pink bow on over a white short-sleeved shirt, and she was waving at Sakura excitedly, something that Sakura found infectious, Hinata-chan. One more time, Naruto felt a stab at the memory portion of his brain due to the name, but once again the name did not fit the person he had originally placed it with. Wakaba Hinata was nothing like the Hinata from Naruto's time in Konoha in more than just appearance. As one of Sakura's best friends that went to another school, Naruto knew her fairly well. The girl also liked fighting and was very energetic. How she was trained, Naruto had no idea, and Sakura's explanations were extremely vague. Naruto was starting to think that too many people knew how to fight for his own good, and it was his fault for living there. Hinata ran over to Sakura. The two squealed and hugged, annoying Karin at the display of affection before Hinata turned around and motioned back to where she had run from. Come on, Batsu. You're so slow. I found Naruto-san, and look. Sakura-chan and Kei-chan are here with him. She spared a look at Karin and stared for a moment before blinking her big brown eyes. I don't know you. She said brightly, getting Karin to cross her arms and roll her eyes. From the wall of people that had formed a crowd ahead of them, out walked Batsu with his hands in his light blue school uniform's pockets, smirking at Naruto with his short, spiky dark hair and dark eyes. Well, look what the cat dragged in. You finally came, out of hiding, Naruto. He said with a chuckle. You've seriously got to get a load of this guy. He saw Naruto's face and chuckled again. You're mad now, but you really won't be when you see him. I guarantee it. He motioned for Naruto to follow him while Sakura, Kei, and Hinata chattered. With no one really she wished to be around out of the girls to talk to, Karin went to follow Naruto and Batsu through the crowd, though doing such irked her to push her way through the commoners. At the front of the thick wall of people by an ornate fountain, Naruto and Batsu stopped, one smirking and the other just gawking at what they were seeing. Karin was quick to catch up and even she placed a hand by her mouth to laugh a bit when she saw what the other two did. Being observed by the crowd was a man with long brown hair tied into a ponytail and sideburns, a traditional karate gi, and 4 ounces. Gloves on, wearing a black undershirt underneath his gi. The thing about the gi and the gloves was the fact that they were bright pink. After breaking a stack of bricks to the applause of the crowd, the man began picking up photos of himself from a stack that he had and started quickly signing them and handing them out to everyone at the front of the crowd. Yes, and now you can see the strength of Psycho Ryu, the strongest style. I can see how many of you are interested in learning my self-made devastating art. You love it. I can see it in your eyes. And since you all do, I'll give all of you here a 50% discount at my dojo. Just 3,395 yen a month. Apply now and you'll get a free Hibiki Dan imitation GIT shirt. Naruto and Karin's eyes twitched at the man's display and the people applauding him. He only broke like 4 bricks, Naruto said in disbelief at how popular the man seemed to be. So many people seemed to be cheering him on. Strongest style, Karin said to herself, thinking along the same lines as Naruto. Such a gaudy name. She watched him do the same again with overdramatic effect added. This is not a demonstration. It is merely a promotional spot for this degrading fighting style. She turned to Naruto and spoke directly to him. He wants to fight you to build his fighting style's popularity around this area. See what I mean? Batsu said, elbowing Naruto in the side. You aren't even mad anymore, are you? After all of the stuff I'd been hearing from a girl in school about the smack this guy was talking about you, I was about to go out and nip this clown in the bud myself. But then I saw him and figured you'd want to do it yourself. He then gave Naruto a pat on the back, hard enough to knock him from the crowd. Go get him, ya, yellow bastard. Naruto stumbled out and turned back to glare slightly at Batsu before shrugging. There wasn't any reason to be mad. He was going to do it soon enough anyway. The man caught sight of Naruto stumbling out from the crowd and a gleam came to his eye as he walked over to Naruto and threw an arm around his shoulder. Aha. So, you're brave enough to approach me yourself to declare yourself my disciple, are you? Well, never fear. I never turn away a student, as long as their check's clear. He turned and displayed Naruto to the whole crowd. and you too can be a powerful and respected fighter the way this young man will be after training in my Psycho Ryu style. Oh, just wait until Uzumaki Naruto gets here. He'll feel the power of my fist firsthand. And there was his opening. Naruto smirked and slipped out of the man's grasp. But, I am Uzumaki Naruto, he said, watching the sheer confidence on the man's face turn to confusion and then to skepticism. Oi, what's with that face? There's no way you're Uzumaki Naruto. The pink-clad fighter said, pointing at Naruto in an overly accusing manner. My sweet little cousin Ran told me that Uzumaki Naruto was the #1 most dangerous man in Aohura City. Hell, the most dangerous man in the whole Chugoku region. People know that name from here all the way to Chiba. There's no way in hell that the most dangerous fighter in the western half of Japan is some kid. Ran. Batsu knew that name. You mean Hibiki Ran. Freshman. Always has a camera with her. Nosy as hell. He asked the man as he stayed in the crowd with Karin. If it was the same Ran, then he went to school with that girl. He could see the resemblance in more than one way because they acted alike too. Yes, the man said before bursting into dramatic tears cascading down his face, that's my baby cousin. Such a dear, sweet girl. She gave me this scoop on Uzumaki Naruto character. She even took all of these pictures of me for my soon-to-be dojo's publicity. Batsu blocked a laugh with a snort and pointed over to Naruto, who was standing, tapping his foot impatiently. Well, I hate to break it to you, but Ran's never seen Naruto before. That really is Uzumaki Naruto. Right there, the crowd, those of which had seen Naruto in the past, began speaking up as well about how that was indeed Naruto. Rolling his eyes at the gobsmacked look on his would-be opponent's face, Naruto began unbuttoning his uniform top, taking it off in favor of the white t-shirt he had on underneath it. So I heard you've been looking for me. Who are you anyway? He asked as he tied the uniform top around his waist. That seemed to set the man off. He grit his teeth in annoyance, vein pulsing at his temple. Are you telling me you haven't heard of me? What? Have you been living under a rock or something, kid? I'm Hibiki Dan, world-renowned fighter extraordinaire. Who? Naruto said, squinting his eyes at Dan and scratching his head. Dan stomped his bare foot on the ground repeatedly in something of a little tantrum. How don't you know who I am? I just beat Sagat last year. You can't tell me you didn't hear about that. Naruto, Karin, and Batsu all face-faulted on the ground before standing up and shouting at the same time, you beat Sagat. The last man perceived as the very best fighter in the world, Sagat was known far and wide as the god of Muay Thai. He had gone unbeaten for over 20 years since winning that title as a teenager. A few years ago, he had lost in the final round of the World Warrior Tournament to Ryu, but that had been a loss to Ryu, and Naruto had seen him fight. Both Ryu and Sagat, actually. Sagat was a monster of a man, and the most talented hand-to-hand fighter he had ever seen. Ryu somehow beat him, and Naruto didn't even want to feel like he was taking this Dan guy as seriously as he would have taken Ryu. That is completely absurd, Karin exclaimed in disbelief, shaking her head in her blonde, curly locks around only for everyone in the crowd besides them to nod, backing up Dan's claim. Really? This man defeated Sagat. The Sagat. Batsu had his phone out and was checking on the internet at that very moment before his beady black eyes went wide. I'm checking the site where they track fighters and their recorded street fighting wins and losses, and it's true. This guy has a win recorded over Sagat. He held up his phone to actually show the list of recorded fights Dan had. Honestly, if one were to overlook the win he had over Sagat, it would be kind of pathetic. It was the only name win that he really had, and this site is noted for being the most factual out of them all. No hearsay or rumor-centered stories. Only hard evidence. And now I'm traveling around showing the world how great my technique is. Dan asserted, proudly pointing to himself with his thumb, the technique that was good enough to get me a victory over the god of Muay Thai. And your next Uzumaki. A legend like myself can't overlook the up-and-comers either. Yeah dude. Batsu interjected again in order to address Naruto, tapping away on his phone to do a bit more research. You're ranked. In Japan, you're ranked as the number 74 best fighter of the country out of top 100. That utterly confused Naruto. Wait, I'm ranked. I don't prize fight. I'm a street fighter at best. A shrug came from Batsu. What do you want me to say? You're ranked. They even have your recorded win-losses against other people in here. Apparently more than a few people that you beat up had some kind of notoriety somewhere. He pointed to Karin. They even have your wins over this girl right here, me, Sakura, and others from around here. You've pretty much fought almost everyone worth a damn in Aohura City by now for one reason or another. How in the hell did they get any of those things? Naruto shouted, feeling that his privacy had been quite invaded. He never told anyone that he had beaten anyone other than those that were his friends, and that was only whenever the topic came up. Everybody's got a phone with a video camera, a regular camera, or at least internet access these days, dumbass, Batsu said, having no patience for the fact that Naruto was a technological invalid for the most part. It's not that much of a stretch that not only does someone know you beat somebody, but 4 out of 5 times if you did it in public there's probably video of it somewhere. Have you ever Googled you? Maybe we should try it later. Karin tapped her chin in thought over the ranking after first disputing with herself why herself or Sakura hadn't been in the top 100 despite winning her own share of street fights and getting to the finals of her tournament last year. That actually does make sense though. You do travel around Japan quite extensively. With Naruto's luck to boot, he had probably fought against more than his share of people even when he didn't have jobs that involved it. Naruto's luck, or lack thereof, usually revolved around violence of some sort. But no matter who Dan had or hadn't beaten, he had still called Naruto out, and Naruto was ready and raring to go. The blonde boy bounced around on his toes to limber up and prepare. Dan likewise set himself into a fighting stance that looked like Ryu's, only looser. I hope you're ready for a beating, kid. Chuckle, you're gonna need an extra 6-pack of courage to step up to me, Dadbayo. Naruto said in reply as he set himself into a fighting stance to prepare for Dan. You called me out, so you can tell me when to start. Fight, Dan said before running right at Naruto, screeching with an obnoxious battle cry. It threw Naruto off guard for a moment before he realized that they never made rules, which obviously meant that there were no rules. Around Naruto's left wrist was a small sleeve-like band that held shuriken on the wide sides of his wrist. It was usually concealed by his jacket, but not today. He quickly grabbed a shuriken from the pouch in it and threw it right at Dan. He had expected Dan to dodge it, and prepared himself to react accordingly to whatever Dan did in response. Dan, however, did not evade. The shuriken hit Dan right in the upper right chest and stopped his attack run right in his tracks as he grabbed at the metal throwing star and started instantly whining, "Gah! Did you just throw a ninja star at me? Ow, who does that? A ninja?" Both Karin and Batsu deadpanned. Dan poked at the shuriken several times, flinching in pain and choosing not to pull it out himself before looking back over at Naruto. Hey! Who told you that you could use weapons? Naruto looked around vacantly before shrugging. Who told me that I couldn't use weapons? Now stop whining and fight me already. That's it, kid, Dan said, flexing and trying to be threatening to Naruto and failing miserably. You're asking for the thunder. Well, Dan is bringing it right to you. Denkakyaku, severing air leg. Dan rushed at Naruto and jumped at him, delivering a knee strike that was blocked, followed by a long kick with the opposite leg that was also stopped and a final kick that sent Naruto stumbling back despite the fact that it registered no injury on Naruto's person due to the guard of the young blonde. After Dan landed, he turned and posed to the crowd. Yeah. Feel the power. How'd you like that key? He turned around to face Naruto again only to get socked right in the face hard enough to spin back towards the fountain like a top, being stopped by the stone rim of said fountain keeping him from falling into the water. Dan cracked his jaw and spit some blood out of his mouth. Hey! I had my back turned. Naruto stomped his foot tantrum style. I don't care. You beat Sagat, didn't you? Take me seriously and fight me like you fought him, or I'm going to kick your teeth down your throat. He threatened. Don't underestimate me. I might be a kid, but that doesn't mean anything. Standing back up off of the fountain, Dan narrowed his eyes at Naruto and started channeling visible ki to his right hand. All right, Junior, you asked for it. And you're right. If I don't go all out, how else will anyone know that my style really is the best? It works two ways for me to fight you properly, so you win. You get the Hibiki Dan signature move. Get ready to feel the force. Godoken, self-taught fist. Dan threw his attack at Naruto with one hand and it looked just like a perfect Hadoken, unlike Sakura's which had more marked differences from the real deal. It actually alarmed Naruto in how good it looked. For the 5 feet that it flew before dissipating harmlessly in the air. Karin probably would have laughed if it hadn't been so pathetic. Performance anxiety, I presume. She commented to Batsu, who could only nod dumbly. Naruto just stood and stared before turning towards his 2 friends at the front of the crowd, noticing that the person he was looking for was not amongst the pair. Oi! Sakura-chan, are you watching this at all? He yelled, trying to get the girl's attention wherever she was in the crowd. I can't see Naruto. Nobody's moving. What's happening? A grin came to Naruto's face as he cupped his hands over his mouth to project his shout. Better, good news. You don't have the worst Hadoken I've ever seen anymore. Dan animatedly fell to the ground upon that declaration from Naruto. Hearing Naruto start to laugh at him and his fighting skills, Dan got angry and pointed at Naruto. At least I have my own attacks. What can you do except crawl around and hide like a roach under the fridge? Tell me, what can you do? Naruto stopped laughing, a chuckle coming out every now and then as he responded, well, yeah, I can't do a Hadoken either, so I guess picking on you isn't fair. But I can do this though. He formed the ram hand seal and then formed 3 more, stopping on the dragon seal and inhaling sharply before exhaling and spitting, Chakura Tanki Sha Chakra Spitfire. From Naruto's mouth flew a blue wispy ball of blue energy that managed to fly straight towards Dan, who was smart enough to jump away and dodge it, showing that he was actually well conditioned from the height of his jump. The attack from Naruto flew and exploded off of the head of the human figure at the center of the fountain, knocking the head of the statue clean off. Whoops, Naruto said, looking mortified at the public property damage of his jutsu. My bad, I'll fix that later for free. Before he could finish, Dan fell from the sky and landed with a punch that snapped the distracted Naruto's head to the side and sent him stumbling, the crowd gasping at the clear impact of the landed strike. Ha! How do you like that? Dan verbally taunted before slightly backing off and ing his arm back with a handful of ki, Godoken, self-taught fist. This time he was well within the range of the attack and the ball of energy slammed clean off of Naruto's open torso, sending him flying back through the crowd of people that he bumped into with force. Yeah. And that looks like another victory for Hibiki Dan. He posed to the crowd before he felt movement from Naruto. Oh, come on. That was full force. Who pops right back up from that? Naruto coughed and thumped his chest with his fist before getting back up from the ground. That was it? He asked, looking over himself and not even seeing any damage done to his clothes. Sakura-chan's Hadoken at least burns me a little bit when it hits. That was like a punch with ki. It didn't even hurt any worse. The crowd scattered away to get a better view once Dan ran towards Naruto and the two began to exchange actual strikes. Starting with a stiff straight punch, Dan missed Naruto, who retaliated with a side kick to the body to knock him off balance. Naruto went to make his hand seal for some cage bunshin help, but Dan didn't let him begin a special technique, punching Naruto in the face and breaking his focus. Trying to form clones several more times didn't bear any fruit, except for when Naruto used the cage bunshin hand seal to block a kick from Dan, so maybe he doesn't. Naruto switched from trying to use a jutsu to simply fighting hand to hand again before he screwed around and got his teeth knocked out by this guy. Slipping away from a side kick, Naruto grabbed the kick with one hand and pulled himself towards Dan to strike him hard in the face with a backfist that had momentum behind it. Blood flew from Dan's nose and he huffed out of it to clear his sinuses of the red, spraying it all over, including on his and Naruto's clothes and face. Naruto jumped back from the exchange and wiped Dan's blood from his own face in a bit of disgust before finally making the cross-hand seal, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. Dan's jaw dropped when 20 Narutos stood between him and the original and rushed him. He soon recovered though and began taking them in the order that they reached him, blocking their strikes and forcing them to come to him, refusing to let himself get surrounded by the group as he cut into their numbers. A punch to one's stomach and a kick to one's head that dispelled 2 clones and Dan jumped right out of the soon-to-ensue pileup before he was stuck. 3 clones jumped into the air after Dan only to be met with a Godoken that hit 1 clone and knocked it into the other 2, dispelling all 3. The crowd began to cheer as Dan landed and started fighting off Naruto's clones again until they all dispelled en masse, creating a large smokescreen. Raw. Naruto dove right through the smoke and delivered a skull-shaking shot to Dan's face that shook him and forced him to recoil right down to his foundations. His knees shook and nearly buckled. Naruto struck him so hard. In Naruto's other hand he formed a Rasengan to put the fight to bed right then and there. Rasengan, spiraling sphere. Godoken, self-taught fist. Dan hurriedly lashed out with his own key technique in a panic. The 2 attacks met and exploded in a blast, knocking both combatants away from each other. Naruto flew into the fountain and slammed off of the statue, landing in the water face down, submerging and then resurfacing, staying there momentarily before pulling his head up and gagging on the water. Dan, despite being thrown away much harder, had an easier landing with a crowd of slow-moving spectators to break his fall. Naruto popped up, pissed off that he was thoroughly soaked and ran a hand through his wet hair. Okay. I'm definitely awake now. Chakura Tanki Sha, Chakra Spitfire. Dan jumped out of the way of the attack and the crowd scattered and hit the deck, finally giving Sakura and the other girls a chance to see the fight clearly with Karin and Batsu. Come on, Naruto. Batsu yelled at Naruto as he saw his friend jump out of the fountain to attack Dan again up close. Stop screwing around and knock this mother out. The wild-haired boy was fidgeting impatiently. He fought me harder than this. Why's he just around here? Sakura wondered the same thing as well until she saw people getting closer to the fight once again to watch Naruto and Dan go back and forth, missing their strikes. That's it, she said in sudden realization, there are too many people around here. What does that have to do with anything, Sakura-chan? Hinata asked curiously. Naruto doesn't seem like the shy kind of guy that plays things close to the vest like that. From a few past meetings where Naruto would routinely use his abilities for even the most rudimentary things like getting up to get himself a drink, it was clear that discretion was not the better part of valor for Naruto. Kei had to nod in agreement. Naruto's a total show-off at heart. He loves stuff like this, fights in public where people can see him. He'd almost be as obnoxious about his fighting as this Dan guy as if it weren't for the fact that Naruto can actually back it up. Naruto stuck to walls regularly, walked upside down on ceilings in the hallway at school just because he was bored, and tried to skip school before by leaving a clone in his seat. He would have gotten away with the last one too if his clone hadn't been just like him in every way, attention span included. It fell asleep in class. When the teacher smacked him with her ruler, Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. No, it's not about the attention, Sakura disputed, pointing out how much closer people were moving still. Look, the spectators simply wanted a better view, but it was messing with Naruto whenever he tried to back off to begin a jutsu or thought of using weapons. He didn't want to put anyone in danger. It doesn't bother Dan because when he throws his Godoken, it's never going to go out of control. Naruto's Spitfire and all of his bigger attacks are really dangerous. Frowning at the thought of Naruto holding back so that he didn't hurt anyone, Karin spoke up. Uzumaki-san is a total bleeding heart, she said, criticizing his mindset. If someone gets in his way, they simply should have been faster. Really, were anyone to be harmed, it would be their own faults for standing too close to a fight between professionals. You know Naruto's not like that, Sakura said, narrowing her eyes at Karin. If these people don't get out of his way, he's not going to use his big moves. She looked back at the battle with Naruto trying to knock Dan around, but every time he was about to deliver a punishing blow or wished to smash him into sweet unconsciousness, his setups would steer Dan back enough to get him close to the people. The circle seemed to be getting tighter and tighter. Karin turned to Sakura with a raised eyebrow and an intrigued look. Are you telling me that Uzumaki-san has big moves? As in, more impressive techniques than I have already seen from him. And he wouldn't use said big attacks as long as there were people around. Well, that simply wouldn't do. Karin was curious, and Naruto's propensity to think of others was not going to keep her from satisfying that curiosity. After all, his problem with the onlooking crowd could be remedied very quickly. Karin cleared her throat and held up her wallet from her school bag. Attention. Everyone that stands back away from the fight and gives the combatants a properly wide berth of at least 40 feet all around, I will pay them 5,000 yen each. Eyes immediately panned away from the fight. Even Naruto and the 3 clones he had helping him, as well as Dan, stopped to look at Karin in shock. Skepticism appeared on many people's faces until she rolled her eyes and reached into her wallet to pull out a large wad of banknotes. Hinata blinked at the near immediate sight of everyone stepping back like obedient dogs. She turned to gawk at Karin, who had a pleased and victorious look on her face. Wow, you do know that this is like at least 70 people, right? That's 350,000 yen. Karin looked at the amount of money she still had in her hand and looked into her wallet before frowning. Shibazaki, could you pop over to the bank for me and withdraw enough money for upwards of 70 people? Almost seeming to appear out of thin air, her attendant Shibazaki appeared, frightening the other 4 spectator friends of Naruto. The loyal steward bowed and took her bank card before making off to head to the nearest place to withdraw from. There we go. She said in a pleased voice, now you had better stop holding back, Uzumaki-san. I refuse to employ weak individuals to represent me, she said in something of a sing-song voice. Fine, Naruto said with a grin, I think I've got enough space to cut loose now. No more holding back. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, multiple shadow clone technique. Even from his first move, Karin immediately found herself satisfied with what she was seeing. Oh, my goodness, she said under her breath. The large space between the crowd was filled by nothing but copies of Naruto, completely surrounding Dan on all sides. What the hell is this? It's mirrors. It has to be mirrors. People can't do this kind of thing. Man, it's been a while since I tried to use this many clones like this at once. Naruto said as all of his clones seemed to be smirking, chuckling, cracking their knuckles, and looking at Dan with squinted eyes. Let's see your strongest style, block this. The clones started to rush Dan and grab a hold of him. He managed to take out several, but compared to the dozens in the plaza, it was unmanageable. Eventually his arms and legs were bound by the shadow clones. They then hurled him into the air. Like a swarm of insects taking off from an apple, they all started launching into the air after Dan, who was flipping head over heels. The first clones to reach him kicked him down to the others that punched him higher back into the air, letting other clones boost up off of their shoulders when they were dropping to the ground to get a higher jump over Dan where they kicked him down again, and this just went on and on and on until it was clear he could no longer continue. Naruto dispelled his clones and let the quite thoroughly beaten up Dan fall to the ground, unconscious, bloody, and covered in bumps and bruises to say the very least. Uzumaki Naruto Mugen Renden, Naruto Uzumaki Infinite Combo, Naruto said, naming the jutsu for the sake of the audience and his would-be benefactor Karin. Remember this, Dan. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. And to you and everyone else, I'm the greatest ninja alive, he said with a smile before turning to the crowd with a displeased look on his face. Oi. The next time you see people winging balls of ki or chakra around, get the away from them, you idiots. A Hadoken that could sustain itself at a distance would have made victims of people left and right if Dan's could have lasted longer than 5 feet. And those idiots just kept moving closer and closer despite the fact that people had already been injured during the fight. To that end, he felt that he was in the right to profanely shout at them. His tirade effectively shooed them all away from the scene. With the fight finished, people were eager to get away from the crazy blonde teenager. After properly scolding the present populace to his heart's content, Naruto put his grin back on and turned to Karin. Thanks for the open space, by the way. His special moves really ed, but his basics were pretty solid. Training with Sakura cleaned up Naruto's hand-to-hand fighting in close with no maneuverability, but he'd always be partial to the hit-and-run moves that comprised his main strategy. Still stunned as she had never seen the full scope of Naruto's Kage Bunshin creation capabilities, Karin had to take a moment to snap out of it and put her normal facade back on. Oh. Do not mention it, Uzumaki-san. As they spoke and she got her swagger back, Shibazaki was in the background paying everyone. You had to save your job after all. Good work, by the way. She walked out and poked at Dan with her foot, getting a groan from him, but this person defeated Sagat. I simply cannot believe it. Naruto gave her a deadpan look as the others walked out to join them. I don't know if I should take that as you calling me weak, or what. He then found himself in a headlock from Batsu. Hey. Get off of me, jackass. Hey, Batsu said, sneering at Naruto while giving his friend a noogie. You see what happens when you hold back. You make a fight harder than it should be. You should have been winging shuriken and using spitfires until you ran out of weapons and energy. There were people, Naruto said, lifting Batsu off of the ground and throwing him off of his shoulders. Naruto clicked his teeth in annoyance when Batsu just rolled through it and landed on his feet. I don't want to kill anybody. He spared a look down at the Dan, even this guy. My bigger moves, that one was the nicest one. They get worse. Sakura's eyes went wide. Your attacks get stronger. But that combination had to have been more than 1,000 hits. That was amazing. He said he hadn't made that many clones at once in years, and he had never even thought to go that far to fight against her. She didn't know how to feel. Happy that he cared enough to make sure she stayed alright, or upset because he didn't ever find enough of a reason to fight like that against her. Oh, that wasn't even close to my worst, Sakura-chan, Naruto said with a pronounced grimace. The last time I actually went all out, the last time he had been forced to go all out, it had been a fight that was more or less to the death that had dumped him in this world, away from his home. Meh. Never mind. Well, Hinata started before laughing spiritedly. That was awesome. You punched and kicked that guy so many times I lost count. He's out cold. The petite girl's bright mood broke Naruto's funk just like that. Naruto smiled before his brain seemed to take a moment to buffer and he spoke half robotically, answering her question. I hit him 817 times. He then noticed the others looking at him in shock. What? I didn't even know you could count that high. Batsu jabbed, getting a small giggle out of K before the older boy took an elbow to the belly from Hinata for being mean to the victor of the day. Karin had a blonde eyebrow arched in interest at learning more and more about Naruto and his strange abilities, while Sakura just came out with it and asked the question that was eating at her and her rival. Naruto, how do you know that? Nobody was counting those. Naruto wasn't really certain. All he could do was take a guess. 1 or 2 of my clones counted. I think they got between 830 and 750. 817 sounds good though, right? They didn't say anything to you before they dispelled, Sakura pointed out. Yeah, I know, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly as they all began to leave the plaza. It's weird. When my clones go away, I think I get their experiences back, like a flash of deja vu. It's creepy if it's something that I wasn't there for, like when Kaide-sensei hit my clone in class. They all kept talking amongst themselves while Dan lay there on the ground, finally waking back up and groaning in pain, twitching every now and again. Gurk. I'm still the man, I'm still the man. I'm blacking out again, he said before going limp. 3,395 a month, free GI replica shirt. Later that afternoon, After the trouble in the plaza downtown, the lot of kids went to a small burger place to get something to eat. Karin had sent Ishizaki to go get her something more suitable to her refined palate. There, Naruto got the chance to take a good at the website that ranked fighters from around the world. Looking at Kei's smartphone with a dropped jaw, Naruto sat between Karin and Batsu while Sakura, Kei, and Hinata sat on the other side of the booth. He didn't know quite how to feel about what he was seeing. I'm famous, he marveled aloud. He was well known to an extent. Locally, at least. For the most part, he was acknowledged in the way he had always wanted to be when he was younger. The funny thing was that it didn't seem like it at all, but if people were calling him out, that had to count for something, huh? I don't feel famous. You are not famous, imbecile, Karin said, bursting his bubble before either his head started to swell or he zoned out to daydream about his fame at the table. She took a bite of her fancy-looking food brought to her by her butler. You are known in certain circles, but you are not famous. No one outside of this town that does not actively train knows who you are, and if you ever ventured closer to Tokyo or abroad, I doubt that 5 people in total would know your name. His name's kind of cool. It would stick with you if you heard it though, Kei lamely added, getting a shake of the head from Karin. Hey, Naruto, are you done yet? You've seen your little profile already. He could keep looking on his phone if he was really that interested. Naruto waved her off as he was barely listening at that point though, instead checking to see how complete this whole thing happened to be as he read his results aloud. 212 recorded one-on-one fights, no proven losses. He then frowned, no notable victories. Batsu barked out a laugh at hearing that and dodged a French fry thrown at his head from Naruto. So, basically, they're saying that your record is padded. You have a lot of fights against nobodies, but you've never been seen losing, so they had to give you some kind of credit. Look. He pointed out Naruto's list of past opponents, and the vast majority of them didn't have a name, just being noted as random opponent 1 foot all the way to the end of the number of Naruto's more recent fight against an unnamed opponent. There were well over 150 of these. Batsu then held back a snicker as Naruto scrolled lower and read the comments left on his profile page by site contributors in chronological order from the latest one written. How many stupid voted Uzumaki Naruto high consistently enough to get him in the top 100 in Japan? He's never even fought a tournament match. Number 74. He should stop kicking around nobodies if he actually wants someone to rank him for real. Uzumaki is just a violent delinquent kid with key abilities. He's more of a sociopath than a fighter to look out for. If he stepped up and fought someone with some name notoriety, then maybe he'd deserve it, but 200 plus fights against nameless tomato cans isn't helping his case. He might as well beat up a punching bag on camera for all most of his wins are worth. I'd love to see any of you win 200 fights straight against nameless tomato cans. I'd love to see any of you win a single fight, period. There's a reason you're all here posting on this website talking about guys like him instead of having us talk about you. I think Uzumaki could take some of the top 20 if he ever had the shot. He is like 15 after all. Just how well traveled do you expect him to be? Exactly. He's greener than a blade of grass. If he wanted to be a real fighter, he should have just foregone high school to train. He's wasting his own time and effort now with school if he's trying to do both at once. It's just stupid. How is he green? He's been on the radar for 3 years. Eventually he had to break through to the top 100. All fighters under the rank of 20 are pretty much future prospects, washed up old contenders, and journeymen. I'd say Uzumaki's a prospect. The second he takes on a real fighter, he'll get slaughtered. I heard Hibiki Dan was looking for him. I can't wait until the results from that surface up. Being unbeaten is all he has. The first time he loses, there's no reason to keep him in the top 100. Boot his bogus ninja wannabe out. Naruto angrily passed Kei's phone back to her, much to Batsu's chagrin as he was still reading the comments. They were the best part of the page in his opinion. Ah, come on. Some of those were kind of funny. At least let me read the archives from last month. Kay shrugged as she tucked her phone away. Some people have all the time in the world to argue over some guy they'll never meet in person, I guess. Sakura noticed that Naruto was uncharacteristically silent and reached out a hand to grab his forearm and get his attention. Naruto, are you alright? What are you thinking? He looked at his brown-haired best friend and audibly clicked his teeth irritably before answering. I was just thinking that I could probably find all of these people and kick their asses for talking shit about me. That's pretty much what the internet is for, Naruto, Kay said, slandering others anonymously. Finding these people and beating them up isn't going to change that. It would probably make it worse. I can just imagine the reaction comments now, Hinata said. The thought of Naruto beating up some web contributors and then reading what they'd post about him next thoroughly amused her. And then thinking of his possible reaction to that had her giggling in fits. You'd be better off just not going back to that site again. It'll only make you madder. At least he's ranked, Batsu added, even though he didn't mention the fact that he himself was ranked number 99 in Japan. He was rather proud of that fact and he wasn't curious enough to read the comments on him like Naruto. Ignorance was bliss in some cases. Sakura gave Naruto a soothing smile to try and make him feel better. You don't really even care about being ranked or not at all anyway. Being the best isn't why you fight, right? You told me you do it to protect the people you care about. Protect them from what? Karin interjected, holding her cheek in her hand in a bored manner as she looked at Sakura and the others. What exactly is there to protect any of you from? There is no real crime in Aohura City. Major organized crime elements do not stray seriously over to this part of the country, and no one is foolish enough to try and attack me. So, there is no significant danger. You obviously don't hang out around Aohura City enough then, Hinata remarked as she took a sip of her drink, thinking back to just how much trouble she got into with Batsu not too long ago. His hiring of Naruto to help them actually got him acquainted a bit better with her. Naruto actually traveled around, so there was no telling what he could eventually or had already stepped into at some point. Danger never exactly occurred in Karin's presence, but that didn't mean it didn't happen at all. Why do you hire me for bodyguard work all the time then? Naruto asked the well-to-do heiress. You must really like my company, I guess. But that's impossible, because you kind of hate me, don't you? Karin's cheeks turned red, but one couldn't see it due to one being in her hand and the other facing away from anyone in the booth's sight. It was a good thing, or else the others might have gotten the wrong idea. I do not hate you per se, Uzumaki-san. I may dislike you with great intensity, but hate is a word I would more readily reserve for Sakura-san. In return, Sakura stuck her tongue out at her, getting Karin to smirk haughtily at her. It is better to be safe than sorry in any case. This is why I ask you to accompany me to so many places. That, and it rightly ticked off Sakura when she requested Naruto's presence for work when she knew that they were either in school, on the way to school, or on the way home. It was something of an art form in her mind to call him at just the right time, so that Naruto wouldn't be upset, but Sakura would be. At times it was almost like she could feel Sakura's ire for her bothering them through the phone, as if she were there in person. No, you do not do your job just to protect others, Karin ventured to guess, getting a good look at Naruto as if she was trying to see something underneath the surface. If you did, then you would probably be some goofy vigilante superhero type. You seem like that kind of person. She then remembered the way Naruto's eyes lit up when she told him that he was fighting her for 1.5 million yen. I would say that you do it for the money. But judging from your pedestrian lodgings and possessions, the money is not meant to improve your quality of living. However, you do not have any family living with you, or any family anywhere that anyone knows of. Shibazaki started checking into your background when we first started corresponding, and he found no record of you at all until 3 years ago. So, what do you need money for? Naruto lives by himself with no support and pays his own way through school, Sakura interjected in Naruto's defense. He works all the time around town and even further out than that trying to make money to keep himself going. Sometimes he doesn't even ask people to pay him if they really need his help or if they can barely afford him. Her friend was a good person. There wasn't anything greedy about Naruto except when he had a smidge of ramen within his grasp. Then he was a glutton. If he ever gets hurt in a fight and can't do his jobs anymore, then he'd fall into the red. That's probably why he works so hard. Karin ignored her though, keeping her full attention to Naruto as she stared right into his emotive blue eyes. She'd find an answer there. Naruto's eyes gave him away more often than not, no matter what the issue at hand was. And he seemed to be just daring her to truly look for what he was thinking. Tell me what it is that you truly want, she said to him intently. Whatever it is, I am certain I can more than likely obtain it for you, if I feel so inclined. I want to find a way home. He wanted to say that out loud, but he had to bite the inside of his lip to keep from whispering it out. No one here could help him with that. No one there would even believe him, nor would they understand in the slightest. Yeah, what's with the heavy atmosphere? Batsu said, brazenly stealing Naruto's fries and breaking the standoff stare between the two blondes at the table. I don't know if you two are going to fight or kiss. Drawing his attention away from Karin, Naruto took his fries back from Batsu and held them out of his reach when he tried to scramble for them. It would have ended in a scuffle more than likely if every girl on the other side of the booth didn't proceed to kick them hard in their shins to stop them from being stupid. Alright. Damn, but seriously, are you going to do anything about the crap people are talking about you? The only thing you can do to fix it is look for tough fighters and beat them. I don't want to look for tough fighters and beat them, Naruto replied, chewing on fries once he figured it was safe to do so. That isn't going to get me any money, and I don't care some dumb ranking, even if a bunch of nerds like to talk smack on a message board. He didn't use the internet anyway unless he needed to, and he never really needed to unless he and Sakura had a project for school. As a matter of fact, even then she was the one that always did the research when they worked together. Still going ahead with that excuse about the money, are you? With a smirk on her lovely features, Karin's predatory tone got everyone's attention and suspicion. Okay. How about this then? You are interesting to me. So I will fund whatever your endeavor just so happens to be for which you need so much money. I will do this for you, so long as you do something for me. Naruto stared at her suspiciously before sighing in resignation. I think I know what you want, and I guess it's okay. Karin had a victorious look on her face at this point until he spoke again. As long as you're paying, I guess I can take you with me. Karin's elbow slipped off of the table in surprise and her chin crashed onto the hard surface out of surprise. That's what you wanted, right? No, Karin exclaimed, rubbing her chin as she started poking Naruto right in the chest repeatedly. I want you to actually make an attempt to advance in the rankings. I want you to make an attempt at becoming world class, not just known throughout the country, but the entire world. That is what I want from you. Because if you are seen as one of the best in the world, then what would that make me when I beat you? By this point, Sakura definitely smelled a rat, and she didn't like it, so let me get this straight. You want Naruto to go around and actually try to get higher up the ladder. And you'll pay him for it. Just because you want to fight him and beat him? She asked. Why don't you just keep training to try and beat him now? Or travel around to win your own fights? Batsu had to agree. He liked the idea himself if he thought that he could really stack up when it came to high-profile conflicts like that. But he would rather stay in Aohura City with his mother than do such a thing, even if he was able to. Why would you give him money for this? Because if I lost our fight, I want to know that I lost to the very best there is. Karin then flipped her curly hair back over her shoulder and stood proudly. And when I eventually do beat him after he becomes elite, I will give him anything he wants, Karin calmly confirmed in return, anything at all. Because by then, I will have improved enough to defeat him in return, and prove that much like the Kanzuki family in all other things, I am world-class myself. I cannot put a price on that. Batsu just stared her down like she was insane. You are one bored, rich little brat. You know that, right? He asked. Not getting any retort from Karin, who simply didn't care about his opinion one way or the other. Hey, she had just met him that very day, you're seriously going to pay him for this? The reasoning was eventually broken down by Kei, who had sat in abject silence to soak it all in. So, you want Naruto to go around fighting and winning against good fighters until he becomes known as good himself, just so that you can fight him later and beat him, and take his spot or a high spot around him? Karin nodded, seemingly having no shame in admitting such. How high do you want him to go exactly? Until he reaches the world rankings, I will not freely fund him. Being ranked high in Japan means absolutely nothing to me, Karin declared. I will simply give him what he needs to get around and challenge other fighters wherever he desires to travel, and only if I know who he is seeking beforehand. I will not have my generosity taken advantage of. Having Naruto raise his own stock before just challenging him after he did so was the simplest way imaginable to get herself a notable win. Hinata blinked her big brown eyes and then took a sip from her drink that was nearing the bottom. Why Naruto and not Sakura-chan then? Isn't she your actual rival? You two really don't seem to like each other, so wouldn't you want to beat her instead and get something out of it that way? A scoff came from Karin. I can beat her anytime I wish, and she is not interested in fighting for anything other than to obtain the recognition of Ryu. She will never be relevant enough for me to earn much notoriety from defeating her, even if I sponsored another entire tournament. I feel like you just insulted me 7 different ways just now, Sakura deadpanned. She wondered how Karin would like another supercharged Hadoken to snack on instead of her fancy food. That is because I did. I don't have a response to that, Kanzuki-san, but when I do, I'm in. Naruto interrupted before the two could actually get into it. Eventually he wasn't going to be around to stop it, and those two were going to beat the hell out of each other, and probably tear up a good chunk of property in the process. But that was neither here nor there. I'll do it. How much will you give me for each fight? Paid travel was a great start in his venture to search around for what he was looking for. And a little fight every now and again never hurt anyone. Making a noise as if she were actually thinking, Karin tapped her chin before giving Naruto a sugary sweet smile. It depends on how impressive your performances are. I would never shortchange you, I assure you of that. Naruto apparently didn't even realize what he had gotten himself into, but Sakura couldn't hope that Naruto was prepared for some serious repercussions. You just made a deal with the devil, Naruto. I hope you realize that. Such a disarming smile from her blonde rival as Naruto shook her hand. You should have just signed your soul over to the Shinigami. It probably would have just cut out the middleman. Omake. Sakura's first Hadoken. 2 years prior to current storyline, early evening, Aohura City, Sakura's backyard. Hadoken, Surge Fist. 13-year-old Sakura's hands shot out with one vertical palm touching the other one that was placed upside down, although from her hands erupted no concentrated blast of ki despite her putting her all into the movement. Ha! Sakura moaned as she slid to the ground onto her knees and put her face into her red combat-gloved hands. Why? I know I can do this. So, why is this so impossible? Yo, Sakura-chan, Naruto said, popping out from the leaves of a nearby tree in her yard upside down, scaring the life out of Sakura. Unlike Sakura, who still wore her school uniform after school, Naruto rushed home and changed out of that stuff as quickly as he could into a green t-shirt and a pair of olive cargo shorts with white shoes. Want to play some video games? I'm not really in the mood right now, Naruto. Sorry, Sakura said miserably, shifting to sitting on the ground with her knees pulled to her chest. She felt him land on the ground and walk up to her, getting her to look up at his rather concerned face. I think Tsukushi's inside if you want to play him. He's better than me and he wants a rematch with you anyway, she said, trying to convince him to say hello to her younger brother and leave her be for the time being. Not that it worked though, as Naruto stooped down to her level to get a face-to-face view with her. What's the matter? You were fine at school and when I left you to go home, so tell me what's up. He then grinned wryly, mostly to himself. Seriously. Who am I gonna tell if it's something bad? Well, it wasn't anything that was really embarrassing, but it was still something she didn't like admitting, so she mumbled it out under her breath, huh? I didn't hear you, Sakura-chan. Speak up. I can't use ki, she shouted with a slightly red face at admitting such. An alarmed Naruto fell right onto his backside before getting himself back together and sitting cross-legged in front of her. There. I said it. I've been trying to use it for years, but I just don't know what I'm looking for. No dojo in Aohura City actually knows how to do it, because they can't. And I guess I really can't either. That was it. Naruto smiled at her and gave her a friendly pat on the shoulder. Well, of course you can use ki, Sakura-chan. If I can use chakra, you can use ki by now. It's the same process to feel it, and you've been working out and training your focus ever since I've known you. But I've never done it. I can't feel it. Well, do you even know what it feels like? Sakura blinked upon realizing that she had never felt ki before. But wait a minute, there was something wrong with that. Wait. Doesn't ki come from inside of me? My own energy, right? Naruto nodded. So, how could I know what it feels like? Naruto held out his hands for her to take, much to her confusion until he explained, my sensei did this for me when I was a kid to show me what chakra felt like. Now come on. Give me your hands. You still are a kid, Sakura remarked, looking at Naruto's hands in a suspect manner. But then again, what was there to be suspect about? Naruto used ki, or chakra, since that was what he called it and wouldn't ever be swayed to call it what everyone else did. Americans were weird, and it was obvious that he knew what he was doing with it. At least he knew more about it than she did, if nothing else. Okay, she said tentatively, placing her hands on Naruto's and letting him grab a hold of them. Upon grabbing Sakura's hands, both kids closed their eyes. Naruto began breathing slowly and focusing his chakra through his body. Sakura was also trying to focus, thus she felt Naruto's chakra flow off of him and into her to feel. A quiet gasp left her lips as she was overwhelmed by the feeling. That's ki. But it's so strong. There's no way I've ever felt that before. A sheepish Naruto laughed nervously. He forgot that he was supposed to have more energy than almost any living being. Ah, that's my fault. Sorry. I wasn't really trying to control it, intentionally ebbing his chakra to lessen the intensity. Naruto fixed that problem. There. How about now? It was like comparing a raging river to a gentle stream for Sakura when Naruto cut back on his chakra output. It feels comfortable, she said with a smile. It's really warm. It feels like a coat or something. She was then abruptly cut off from the feeling, getting her to snap her eyes open. Hey, why'd you stop? So you can try it now, Naruto said in reply. If you don't get it or forget what you're supposed to be looking for, I'll still hold on to help you out, okay? Sakura nodded and closed her eyes again with determination, looking for that feeling inside of herself that she had just felt from Naruto. It took a while, but eventually she found it centered around her heart and felt her body flush with the rich inner energy. I did it, she said, laughing to herself a bit. I feel it. Did I do it right? Is this it? Understanding her delight at accessing her own power, Naruto couldn't help but laugh right along with her as he could feel the ki going through her. Yeah. You did it, Sakura-chan. That's it. The two just kept laughing, Sakura in pure excitement of finding her ki and Naruto because he was just as happy as she was over the matter. Well, what do we have here? What are you two doing? Both Naruto and Sakura stopped laughing only to find Sakura's mother leaning against the open back door frame of the house. She had long brown hair and a kitchen apron on over her normal clothes along with a sly smile on her face. You two look mighty comfortable with each other. Sakura, honey, I didn't know that you and Naruto were that close. Then again, he is the only boy that ever comes around here, so it does make sense. Wondering what Sakura's mother was talking about, both Naruto and Sakura looked at each other before looking down at their hands that were still joined. An self-conscious blush sprang to the cheeks of both children before they hastily separated hands. Mom, Naruto was just showing me how to feel ki. Sakura hastily defended. Is that what kids are calling it today? I just call it holding hands. Sakura's mother teased, getting a good laugh out of the embarrassed look on her daughter's face and the mortified one on Naruto's. Well, if that's the case, go ahead and show each other all the ki you want. She turned around, shaking her head and planning to leave with one last remark. I wonder if Naruto's birthmarks are hereditary. Mom! Sakura cried out loudly, trying to vigorously get her attention before she shut the door and left it at that. There was no way she was going to get teased over her choice of best friend after such a breakthrough. Naruto really showed me how to feel ki. Seriously, just watch. Hadoken, Surge Fist. Sakura hastily fired a blast while in the form needed to do so, only in her rush to get her mom's attention to alleviate the humiliating situation she didn't notice that she aimed in the direction of the still-seated Naruto, who despite only being 3 feet from Sakura was mentally miles away at the moment with a flushed red face. A flushed red face that was then hit with a blue and purple flashing version of Sakura's Hadoken, knocking Naruto flat on his back and out cold to boot. Sakura let out a helpless squeak and ran to Naruto, grabbing his head and checking over his singed face. Ah. Naruto. No, I'm so sorry, that was an accident. Please, wake up. By then her mother had made it back outside to see her daughter holding onto Naruto's shoulders, shaking him for all she was worth to try and revive him. Don't be dead. Sakura. He'll be fine. Her mother insisted, though her eye twitched when Sakura stopped shaking him and his head tilted back limply. You might really hurt him if you keep shaking him though.